Good evening. This was provoked by something Walt did last year. He did a clinic on weathering diesel locomotives, and it went over pretty well, and people seemed to enjoy it. And I was in the process of weathering a lot of my N-scale cars, so I thought perhaps I should share something about how I weather N-scale cars. So here we go. The first question, well, okay. It doesn't work the way it did 10 minutes ago.
Because it's
Okay. Okay. Okay, I can handle this. Why are we going to bother weathering cars instead of just putting them on the railroad? I mean, when you buy a new car, you're supposed to check the coupler height, and you're supposed to check how well it rolls, and you're supposed to check the weight. But I'm suggesting that you should also weather the car because the real railroad cars are all quite dirty. The second reason is you take this car out of the box, and if it's a gondola, it's painted this bright green, red, green dip, and it doesn't look much like a railroad gondola. And when people look at your railroad, if it's reasonably realistic, there's going to be an interruption to the suspension of disbelief because that green car just doesn't look right. And the third reason is once you get into weathering, it's fun. Now, the rust comes onto the car differently from how you get grime and dirt and damage and scrapes and repaints. So when you weather, you have to do things over and over again to build up layers. And so you start with this nice equipment flat coming out of the box. Well, they painted the deck, that's nice, but it doesn't look much like the real thing. So why did I pick pan pastels? There's a reason. The answer is I'm not that good at this. I think pan pastels give you more control than the other ways. And acrylic and oil washes are nice if you're good at it, and airbrushing is nice if you're good at it, but in N-scale, I have trouble getting enough paint everywhere without getting way too much paint somewhere. And error corrections can be made with an eraser or with a cosmetic wedge. Now, you can't do the stains and the damage and the spills with pan pastels, but there are fairly easy ways to handle that. There's a wide range of colors and you can layer it, but you have to do each layer as a separate project. I'll ignore that. And chalks work pretty well too, but if you weather a car with chalks and hit it with a dull coat or some other flat spray, the chalk flies everywhere. And that's the problem if you're going to have this car in operations where people are going to be reaching down and picking it up and putting it back on the track. So pan pastels can be fixed with this magic, let's see, Tamiya TS80 flat clear spray. This is the greatest stuff for flat clear spray. It's not cheap. And I buy them in boxes of 4. Now, I have to warn you, pan pastels can be quite messy. You see these little things? When you open them up, they like to jump off on the floor upside down. Well, the stuff inside breaks up. The plastic is solid, but and I'll see you after class to tell you how to get it up off the floor, mostly. But the best thing is to have lots of towels and drop cloths. The other thing is you need to keep washing your hands with every layer because you touch the car and you get the black on your fingers. And then the next thing you do is you have this place where you've made it rusty and you put your black fingers on it, and now you've got black on top of the rust. Now, does the gloves help? No, because the black gets on your glove and then it gets where it's not supposed to be. So you just got to wash your hands over and over. And Windex is a fair solvent. I did not say it's an excellent solvent. I did not say it's a good solvent. I said it's a fair solvent. So you spray your hands with Windex, and then you put dish detergent on your hands, and then you turn on the water. And you wash your hands the way Sanjay Gupta taught you on CNN during the Great Lockdown. Well, I mean, it's messy, but it's good. Okay. I know. There. I don't know what's the opposite of space bar, but space, as long as I keep going forward, it's okay. There's a handout on the table, or JJ will bring you one from up here if you don't have one, with the specific recommendations for which pan pastels I use. But I use a lot of the neutral grays of different shades. They have a red iron oxide that's good for medium rust. They have burnt sienna and raw umber. Burnt sienna is good for dirty rust, and raw umber is good for dirty but not rusted. And then there's orange, various colors of orange, but the two I use are the orange shade for recent rust and the dark orange for really old rust. Now, I told you that TS80 is good for not killing pan pastels when they're on the car. The lighter colors will get lighter when you spray it with TS80. And this is a color, this orange shade is a color that gets lighter even though it's not a light color. So with some of the lighter colors, you may have to do it twice. Put it on, spray it, put more on, spray it a second time. I use cheap brushes. Now, they'll sell you these very fancy handle things with a little piece of cloth to put on. Don't use that. First, you can't clean it. So you buy lots of brushes and use different brushes for different colors. And sometimes you need a brush so you can just dab stuff and it kills the brush. So you'll have to replace your brushes. So buy the cheap ones. The other things are steal some of your wife's cosmetic widgets, or maybe go buy your own. They're really cheap. Got to get it out. These things are called tortillons. Tortillon. It's a French word. It's the blending stump that artists use with well, why are you laughing? It's the blending stumps that artists use with charcoal. It's really good for moving the pan pastel around on the car, and you can actually erase a little bit by scrubbing the sides against the place where you put too much pan pastel. It's rolled up paper. It's rolled up paper and it's pointed. And you can buy them at Blick's Art Supply. I don't know any place else to get them in town other than art supply stores. Or you can pay 3 prices online. And then there's the magic implement, the eraser. If you put on too much pan pastel and you decide you've put way too much on, you can erase it with an eraser. You've got to then clean off the eraser on a piece of sandpaper, but you can remove pan pastel before it's fixed with an eraser. Uh, this is a regular old mechanical eraser. I also have what they call a rubber pencil. That's basically a pencil with a piece of rubber. That's good because you can sharpen it on a piece of sandpaper, which is important in scale. Well, I mean, in scale is different. It's different from hugely oversized. The other things we're going to be using is Prismacolor pencils and fiber ink pens and the Magic Tamiya TS80 flat clear spray. And then we're also going to be using some Tamiya primers or rattle can colors for the base coat on certain things. And we also use the Tamiya panel line accent color for a wash, mostly black. Okay, you want to weather. The first step in making it look real is to pay more attention to the prototype. I understand this clinic is going to be put online, we all hope. And there's some photos here that I made 30 years ago that I think will be helpful in what a weathered car ought to look like. So most wood decks are never painted and they're weathered so they look dirty gray with dark splotches. The gondola interiors are usually unpainted, damaged, and very rusty. I'm not going to talk about distressing the sides with a soldering iron or anything like that. Good luck with that, especially in N-scale. I know this from experience. There are other ways involving a hammer and a piece of soft pine on the other side, but that's another matter. Coal hoppers are usually various shades of black inside and out. However, that aluminum hopper in the photo, it's not black except right around the edge where the coal was, is it? So here are some simple goals for weathering. We want to make the interiors look like rusty steel and maybe with damage. We want the decks to look like aged weathered wood. We want the hoppers to look like they've had coal in them. And there's rust and grime everywhere. It's nice to make some lettering look like it's recent or it's been cleaned off. And we want to show, I don't do this here in the clinic, show aging and recent repairs or partial repaints. There's also a hidden agenda here. On your black cars, you want to use weathering to make the details more visible, unless it's poor detail, in which case you don't want to weather it that much. So let's start by weathering the steel gondola. The first thing I did was I masked the sides. Actually, the first thing I did was I changed the loop plates on the outside to make it the right era. And then I masked the sides and I painted the inside with this Tamiya German gray color, or I could have used that dark earth color. If you want it very rusty, start with the dark earth. If you want it not so rusty, start with the German gray. And then I fixed it with Tamiya TS80 so it would hold pan pastels. You want your pan pastels in a sandwich. You want Tamiya TS80 under it and over it. So Tamiya TS80 is the bread and the contents of the sandwich is the pan pastels. The second step is we're going to use that cosmetic wedge and a brush in the corners to put some dark colors on the inside. And I think on this one, I used the burnt sienna instead of the red iron oxide. And then I want to lighten it in place so that it's uneven. You don't want it even. They didn't paint this way. This is just what happened to it. And you might have to redo it before you go into the next step, depending on how much of the pan pastel survived the TS80. Well, we're not done. Now I'm going to use what I call a dry brush technique. I hope you're familiar with dry brush painting, where you take your brush, put the paint on, dab it on a paper towel or something, and then put less paint on the car. You do the same thing with pan pastels. You dab the brush in the pan pastel, get a lot of pan pastel on it, tap it on a piece of paper towel, and then you put less of it on the car. And this is good if you're trying to do something really unevenly. And eventually you'll build enough pan pastel up on the paper towel that you can actually go to the paper towel instead of back to the pan pastel container. And then I take this magic orange shade. This is my biggest discovery with pan pastels. This makes rust look new. So we put some iron oxide on the upper edges and maybe a little bit on the floor. And every time we put something on, we seal it with Tamiya TS80. And we repeat if necessary. I fixed that. Well, I promise I fixed it this afternoon. Okay. Then we want to put some interior details. Burnt sienna is good for dirty rust. So we're going to put some dirty rust on the inside very unevenly. Dry wedge is exactly like dry brush. You put the wedge in the pan pastel, you tap it on the paper towel, and you scrape it along the area you want the color to go on, because this lets you control it. And then we take my other magic color that I did not bring, which is raw umber tint. This is a very light, almost white tint. And this is one where the Tamiya TS80 really does tone it down, and that's good because it's hard to put as little as you really want. So you take the Tamiya TS80 tint and you do right at the upper inside walls to make it look like it's been running down a railroad track with a lot of dust from the ballast that didn't get cleaned out. Then on this time, I'm about to do the outside, so I'll just take off the masking on the outside of the gondola, and I'll do the entire car with Tamiya TS80 because the next step is on the outside. Using the dry brush technique, I want to do burnt sienna extra dark for the rusty side version, or raw umber for just the dirty. And I want to dry brush the outside of the gondola, but now I want to take some of it off. So I take a cosmetic wedge that's clean, which is kind of rare around my house. Take a cosmetic that's clean and you rub it down between the ribs of the gondola. This leaves pan pastel right at the edge of the ribs, and it leaves pan pastel right at the edge of that bulb angle at the top. But you take it off elsewhere, but not entirely. Then we seal it and proceed. And then using the dry brush technique, I want to put some of this raw umber tint as road dust. I want to do it along the lower edge of the sides and on the ends, and weather the underbody and trucks to suit. Be careful weathering trucks and wheels and couplers. Don't weather the couplers at all if you want them to work well. Be careful weathering the wheels. If you can stand the wheels just raw metal, that's very good for operations. The more stuff you put on the wheels, the more stuff you get on the track, and the less well the railroad runs. Now, weathering the trucks is tricky because they're usually this special plastic that doesn't take stuff well. So I paint the trucks without wheels first with the Tamiya TS80, put on a little of this raw umber tint on the wheels and maybe a little rust. Make sure the wheels are the color they're supposed to be before you start this, and just be satisfied. Well, an important element of successful model railroading is knowing when to be satisfied. Pardon? Yes. There's a lot of good stuff you can put on the track to clean the track that will melt the plastic on the wheels. Yes. Well, it's probably more nickel silver or something than steel, but well, you can weather them carefully. You need to paint them first. Yeah, yeah. In fact, if it's KD wheel, you probably want to polish the treads to get the blackening off. But but on my little railroad in N scale, we don't weather wheels much because weathering wheels puts more dirt on the track. So it's hard to it's pardon. Well, in HO, uh, I have a number of HO cars with weathered wheels that sit in the cabinet on the wall and get taken to RPM meets. But I don't have an HO railroad to run them on, so they don't create problems. Let's move on to an equipment flat car. How am I doing for time? Oh, good. Okay, this is a photo I took in Old Tilford Yard 30 years ago. I thought, gosh, that would be an interesting weathering task. Because if you notice, the two sides of the deck are weathered differently because they're just different decks. What's light and what's dark is not the same. Then you got this uh, timber thing down the center, and then you've got some channels next to it where all the tie down chains go. And then you've got dirt on the sides. So what are we going to do with this? Only if Perry will help me go back to the last photo. Okay. No, that was in the Tilford Yard. You remember the overpass over Tilford Yard where you could park illegally and make all the photos you wanted? Yeah. And it was better there than having to park in the middle of the road over Inland Yard. I've never taken any photos at Halloween. Okay. Athern or Intermountain, I forget which, was kind enough to paint the deck beige, so I didn't have to prime the deck, but I did fix it with TS80. Then I took some light gray and I just did the whole deck light gray. All right, let's explain the picture here. All right, I've got the photo that I'm trying to match up the top. I've got the light gray and the dark gray pan pastels open. I've got the flat car down in the middle with masking tape over everything but the car deck. And then I've got that's the eraser pencil. Okay, I've got the eraser pencil and two brushes, and that's the paper towel where I've been dabbing stuff. So first I take the cosmetic wedge and I just make the deck entirely gray. And because I don't like beige, it's older than that. Beige would be fine for a brand new car. And I fix it with my TS80. Then I dry brush this neutral gray extra dark stuff. There's an 820.2 and there's an 820.1, your choice. And I go the direction of the boards and I make these dark areas on the boards, and I get too much because it's hard to not get too much. So I take the fine eraser, and I'm using the eraser pencil here. The white thing is the eraser pencil, and I make some of the boards light gray again. And when I'm finally satisfied, I seal it with Tamiya TS80. But we're not done. The next thing I have to do is to put some areas on the deck that look dirty. And I'm probably going to use the raw umber unevenly on the deck, probably with one of these dry brush, just dabbing here and there. And it doesn't say so here, but I might have also used a little of the burnt umber. I'm sorry, burnt sienna. But I did it unevenly on the deck and I fixed it. And now we've got the channels where the, Mark, you can get this online when it's online. Okay? I'll send it to you. Oh, yeah. You don't need me. You need the stuff I'm doing. That's more important. Okay. All right. So now I've got these. I'll ignore you. I've got these channels down the center of the car and on the edge, and I need to make them look rusty. But even Pan Pastel doesn't give me the degree of control I need. So I'm going to resort to pencils. And I just get a pencil that looks rusty, as sharp as I can get it, and I just mark it down the channel. And this one is too dark, and this one is too light. So what you do is you do the dark one first, and then you do the light one over it. So it's got this, what is this? Burnt ochre pen, Prismacolor pencil first, and then the orange Prismacolor second, and it looks kind of rusty. And that one doesn't need to be sealed, but I'm going to seal it anyway. And in HO scale, you've got more room. So in HO scale, once you've got the wood part of the deck done, you can mask it and dump some Pan Pastel down in the narrow channels and then spread it everywhere when you pull the masking. That's what erasers are for. As long as you haven't sealed it, you can erase your errors, mostly. Now, on the sides, well, I've done so much on the deck, I don't have much energy left to do the sides. So I'm just going to put a little red iron oxide, and I think I use both the red iron oxide and the raw umber on the sides. And you can put some rust on the sill pockets with the pencils again. And we're going to add some raw umber. Where is stains? I guess the stains on the next slide. You seal it and you move on. I left something out. Okay. I took my Tamiya panel line accent color black. It comes in a little bottle like the cement. Shake it up good and take one of these tortillons and you dip it down in the black, and then you put little tiny oil stains here and there. Now, usually on these are equipment cars, so they carry heavy equipment. So most of the oil stains are on the outside sections of the wood, about a third of the way from the tie-down channel to the edge. So you want to have some oil stains too. I just forgot that. So here's the car in service. The caboose on the far right has not been weathered properly. The tank car is kind of rusty. I really like that. And the Fruit Growers Express RBL has had a lot of that raw umber tint on the roof, so it doesn't look so shiny. We won't talk about the hoppers yet. So there's the car in service. And if you come up here, you can see an unweathered equipment flat car and the weathered equipment flat car right next to it, and the difference is really big. There are other cars that have wood floors. If you have a gondola with a wood floor, you weather the floor first, mask it, and then do everything I said about the gondolas. You weather the inside, weather the outside. And the thing about open cars is the inside and the outside are usually weathered completely differently because of the commodities they carry and whether they're painted to begin with. For bulkhead gondolas, the wood sheathing on the end is done the same way. And that car on the far right illustrates the way a weathered black car shows more detail than an unweathered black car. And the black gondola on the right, well, you can't see much from this photo. I'm not that good at photos. Yes. No, these two have wood floors. So I weathered the wood floor first. I primed the floor. I masked everything, primed the wood floor, then did everything I just said about wood floors with light gray and then splotchy darker gray. And then I masked that to do the rusty inside of the gondola. And then I came back at the end and I put some dirt on the floor. I could have done that to begin with, but that way the dirt on the floor and the sides match. The bulkhead gondolas, you do the ends just like you did the floors, except you need to make sure whether the car you're weathering had steel ends or wood ends. A coal hopper. Oh, that we're back in HO again. Over a German grape base, just use a lot of heavy black. Be very careful with the black stuff. It goes everywhere. It jumps off your brush and onto everything. It gets on your hands and onto everything. It misses the drop cloth and the towel. Be very careful with black. I have never successfully removed black from anything. And what goes on your clothes stays on your clothes. Now you can point it out as a badge of honor that I weather my cars, but what gets on your clothes stays on your clothes. And I used both a cosmetic wedge for the big flat areas, and then you have to use a brush to get down in the corners. You don't want unweathered convex corners. Oh, I need to say this. I should have said it back before. On a railroad car, grime tends to accumulate in the convex areas. It does not accumulate on the concave areas. I'm sorry, I've got that backwards. Thank you. Thank you. I got that backwards. Grime accumulates in the concave areas. It looks like a cave. Grime does not accumulate on the convex areas because it gets rubbed off or washed it off with the rain. Or maybe once in this life it gets washed. And then I fix the very dark stuff. And then I add a very bit of rust near the top using mostly wedges, brushes in the very corners near the top, but you don't want the bottom of the inside and the top of the inside weathered the same, because the bottom is all covered with coal dust, but the top, the rust shows through. Then I use this orange shade to put just a little bit of light, fresh rust at the very top. And I do it unevenly. If you're not good at painting evenly, you might be very good at weathering. And now you can figure out why I buy to my TS80 four cans at a time. Yeah. Now, this is a tricky, this photograph doesn't match the top stuff. Still with the car right side up. Over the exterior, I'm going to put some black and neutral gray with the dry brush. And once again, may take a clean cosmetic wedge and get some of it out between the ribs, but leave everything near the ribs. And I'm going to fix it. And then I'm going to take the trucks off and turn it upside down, because hopper cars are one car where you can see a lot of the underbody, especially the part under the overhangs at the ends. For this particular car, these cars aren't that rusty on the outside. They've got too much coal dust to rust, I guess. So we're going to take the trucks, turn the copper upside down. Oh, something else I forgot to tell you. I do most of my weathering with the car fastened with masking tape to one of these long wedge things. You buy these little wedges for whatever you buy wedges for, but they're also good for holding a car for weathering. They're about the right width. And the car stays fastened down. I've only dropped 2 cars while weathering them. They don't like concrete, especially the couplers. So you want the car fastened down pretty well. So you remove the trucks, turn it upside down, and add a lot of heavy grime. And the unrusty heavy grime that I choose is the raw umber extra dark. In the handout, there's a list of all the pan pastel colors I use and a little bit of information about where you would use them. And you have to be very careful getting it in the angles under the ends of the hopper, because there's lots of stuff there that you can break. And fixing it is not easy. And okay, we start this slide with the hopper still upside down, and I'll take some of that raw umber tint, the very light stuff, and I'll put it along the side sills and the ends, and I'll fix it with TS80. Then I'll turn it right side up, and I'll add some rusty damage and scrapes. You can almost see them in this dark photo. And did I bring them? Also at the art supply store, they sell sepia pens that are very good for adding rust highlights. And that finishes the hopper. It's ready to go. Actually, it needs cut levers and air hoses, but it's ready to go as far as weathering is concerned. So we started off with that green dip gondola. And here's the before and after. And I suggest that the one on the right, even if it didn't have nearly as much weathering, it would look a lot better on my railroad and yours. And here's the coal hopper that we tried to make really dirty. On the left, the lettering's very white. On the right, it has both rust and black coal dust and dirt. And yes, I know that I broke it as I was making the photo. All right, I want to thank Walt Lyles for doing that clinic on weathering diesels. That got me started. And then years before that, Walt and Harry did an online clinic during the great lockdown that not too many people participated in. You missed a great clinic on weathering with pan pastels. And then Peter Youngblood and Howard Goodwin also got me started on pan pastels. And Howard Goodwin is responsible for using so much TS80 because he told me it was good. John Travis, Mike Deaton, and Charlie Mason and Paul Volker helped me with the clinic. And Brian Glock is my guru for weathering in general. Now, there are a lot of blogs online that help you with stuff like this. And here are just a handful of them. And then the RPM crowd does a lot of this stuff. And the RPM crowd subscribes to this real steam freight car at groups.io. You don't have to join. The messages are open to anybody. And they have a search function. All of these have a search function that works really well. And Tony Thompson's Modeling the SP blog is my favorite blog of all time. So thank you for listening. Yes. Yes. Sort of, yes. My, ah, it's sort of hazardous. It's not as hazardous as the old float wheel or the scale gun. But you should not use it inside because the propellant is propane. You want to blow your house up? Use a lot of it's inside. Yeah.
Not a question, Joe, but more of a comment at 780.8 raw undertaking. Or something, if you want to pay side freight car. Can't use white for that.
Yeah.
You wanted, you know, a freight car into a company. Any account, it's an awesome comic. It just has that little bit of brown in it.
Yes, but if you're doing that, do not do my thing of taking the tent off between the ribs. Leave it uniform. And dependent, yeah,
Don't wither, but yeah.
and use this to lighten it.
Joe, I have a question.
Yes.
I know that you didn't make.
Yes, it's a colorless blender. I use it on larger areas, but in smaller areas, I just use the cosmetic wedges and this little paper thing, and if necessary, an eraser. Yeah, in larger areas. In smaller areas, this works well enough. Certainly in N scale. Jerry. It depends on the weather, first of all, but it dries pretty quickly. I can put something else on top in about 15 minutes, unless it's raining cats and dogs. It was another, Jim. Yes. It adds a little sparkle to the coal, but this stuff kills about half the sparkle. Now, if you never touch the coal load, you can just leave it on top like a chalk. Perry. Yeah, they would work.
Yeah, it probably makes them too wide of a streak, but that pencil line would do it. And, I showed AK makes the pencils too, and I use those in my seminar. So they're pretty cool.
Any other questions? Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Joe, very much. Hope y'all enjoyed that tonight. It was a great clinic. Great clinic. Hey, everybody, few housekeeping things. If you've got a little bit of trash around your area, make sure you pick up your stuff. There's the corners when you leave. Also, make sure you got your jackets, anything you brought with you. I think somebody may have brought some extra magazines. So I think somebody left them back there. Whoever brought them, am I correct? Before I say you can take them home with you. We will be back here on March 12th. George will be our clinician that night. And our George will be our clinician that night. We also have the train show come up in March. So do that. And don't forget, we have an open house Sunday, 1 to 5. Go online, you get the address and phone number to Mark Bridgewater's. Thank you for coming tonight. Drive carefully and home.